If I set this here?
Sure.
Good afternoon or evening, Water and Power Commissioners. I wrote this down because I'm fairly nervous in speaking in front of a crowd, and I want to try to keep it to 5 minutes, so I won't go off on tangents. My name is Escott Norton. My home is at 3310 Buckingham Road in Glendale. I'm speaking before you today about a ridiculous conflict I'm having with GW&P. Instead of listening to reason, I am getting stonewalled and ignored. I've spent the last 8 years of my life designing, getting approvals, and building my dream home. From the beginning, I set out to build a special, energy-efficient, environmentally sensitive home. You can ask anyone, family, friends, my neighbors, subcontractors, city inspectors. I'm very much against waste and go out of my way to save resources. This is why I was shocked when I got my bill for April-May of '09. For the previous 2 years during construction, I had never had a water bill totaling more than $120, and that includes an all-concrete house, so there was water used during the construction. But all of a sudden, my bill was $5,474.41. That's 45 times my previous highest bill. That's for 1,536,392 gallons in 64 days, which works out to 24,006 gallons per day. This chart from the GW&P, generated by the GW&P website, shows my average use and my street's average use up until the spike, and then it goes back down to a fairly normal level. This is enough to fill 2 12-foot swimming pools per day for 64 days, or 6 4,000-gallon tankers per day for 64 days. Everyone, including the GW&P employees that I've talked to, thinks this is ridiculous. Yet I'm being forced to pay this water I did not use. I tried to resolve this through the regular channels, appealed to the GW&P to use logic, and eventually filed a formal dispute. It was rejected on the basis that the meter was right. And that is the only basis that I was denied, according to the report. I was told of only one test, a water meter accuracy test, that was performed. It showed the meter was running a little high but within acceptable standards. Therefore, I must pay. I have so far paid over $3,000 towards this bill as instructed. Frustrated by the unfairness of the situation, I also told my story to the Glendale News Press. The response by everyone who has read it, who has talked to me, has been disbelief, except for that of Mr. Steiger. His response to the story, and I'm going to quote him from an article that was in response, his response was laughable in my opinion. It was so inaccurate. First, he mentioned, and I'm quoting, extraordinary measures and a series of tests. They only sent me vague results from one test. I think if they had done more tests at the time, they should have sent me the results. I think the burden of proof is on them. Steiger says, and I quote, honestly, after testing it as many ways as we know how, we found nothing wrong. He said, zero. The fact, according to their own report, is the meter tested high, but within allowable levels, so I don't really consider that zero. It seemed like he was trying to brush off the reporter. Let me quote again. The utility did calculate that a hose on Norton's property could have used exactly 1.5 million gallons of water if it was left on for 64 days, the period of the billing cycle in question, and that water could have spilled into a storm drain in front of his home, Steiger said. First, there is no storm drain in front of my home. The water would have had to flow down Buckingham, turn left on Chevy Chase, flow across Chevy Chase, and then back across Chevy Chase as it wound down the hill to the nearest storm drain, which is 800 feet away from my home. It's a long hose. Second, that hose would have had to be running 24 hours a day for the entire 64 days at 17 gallons per minute. My water pressure only allows between 2 and 6 gallons per minute, depending on what else is on. I think someone, at least one of the more than 10 inspectors during that period of time, would have noticed the 800-foot-long hose running at 17 gallons per minute. Bill Mace, Assistant General Manager of Water at Burbank's Utility, also suggested in the same article that a running toilet could use up to 14 gallons per day. I have 5 toilets. If all were running 24 hours, that would be 7,000 gallons per day. And again, if they were all running 24 hours a day for 64 days, many people besides myself would have noticed. So, all of my toilets and a hose turned on full blast, allowing for no other water usage for 64 days, that would only equal 1 million gallons and 960. And we're still short of 500,000 gallons. This is ludicrous. If there was a leak under my house, another suggestion that was made, under almost 500 tons of concrete, my home is solid concrete, floors, walls, ceilings, foundation, it would have had to soak through solid rock. I have my soils report here to show. And my house wouldn't have sunk into a sinkhole the size of a few swimming pools.
Well, Mr. Norton, I think we get your point, and if you can just wrap it up quickly.
Okay, all right. It's insulting and ridiculous. This is where it's personal to me. It's insulting and ridiculous that the numbers on a meter are held over my reputation, the eyewitness accounts of neighbors, and logic. As far as I know, the only thing GW&P can prove is that the meter shows certain numbers. There is no proof that a huge amount of water poured through it. Do they have one eyewitness to the river water flowing down, or the 364 tanker trucks backed up to my house for 16 hours a day for 2 months? Were there any complaints lodged against me by neighbors or city officials? And the other...
Thank you.
If you think that maybe this water usage happened for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, the entire 64 days, I would have had to know the day that the meter was read, and then stop wasting the water for those 10 days that inspectors were there and any other witnesses, and then start it again, and then stop it again right before the next meter read. I urge you to act to reverse this billing error and to apply a credit of the amount in excess of my next highest bill. I would be satisfied with this outcome and will not pursue any further action. I've submitted copies of all the pertinent documents as well as the newspaper reviews and letters to the editor. I have 5 copies here which you can have.
Yes, and thank you for that. And I think I've seen the article. I think most of us have. And if Mrs. Lycan can respond to that, I think we all appreciate having Mr. Horn in front of us, so that can be for the record.
Okay. What Mr. Norton has described in terms of the facts of the meter being read and tested are correct, and I'll add a little bit to that. There's not, I can't describe everything. There's privacy laws that restrict what I can say here. And let me say right up front, Mr. Norton, that you do have the right to formally appeal to this commission. And rather than get into a long discussion today, I would suggest and urge you to do that, okay, to make a formal appeal to the commission. However, just to hit some of the other pieces of this, there are other extenuating circumstances that I cannot mention, but we can at some future date, that do impact this situation. But I do want to mention the testing. The test, there was more than one test. I witnessed 2 of them. There was the test, the formal test that you received a response to. We tested it again for our own purposes after that, where we're not required necessarily to respond to you. We will, though. We will provide that to you. The same result. We also tested it by literally putting a volume of water through the meter to try to simulate that volume of water, which also tested positively in that regard. And we also analyzed the register itself, which is quite unusual. It's not something we would normally do, but given this situation, we tested the register to make sure that the register itself didn't fail or was not influenced by outside vibrations or other such things. So we did everything we possibly could, which is far and away well beyond the norm, to test this meter, to try to find a reason to corroborate the fact that the water did not pass through there. Our conclusion is the water passed through there. So that's our conclusion without going into any other details at this point. But as I would mention to you, I would urge you to present a formal hearing here.
I had a couple of questions. What's the size of the meter?
1 inch.
1 inch, okay. Was it checked for any kind of tampering or anything like that?
Yes.
Right afterwards?
Yes, it was.
And nothing was found to indicate
Nothing
tampering?
obvious, no.
Okay. How how does the formal complaint procedure work?
Christine?
That's something that I would need to investigate for you, and I could certainly speak with you about that separately.
Okay. Could you also advise us?
Absolutely, I could do so at the next meeting.